Hello everybody, it's Jrobi bringing you Game 7 of the World Chess Championships. Current World Chess Champion Anand, of course, is defending his title against Topalov, and we're in Game 7, and this is actually the second game in a row that Topalov has had the black pieces now, because the second half of the match, they changed the ordering around. So Topalov, unfortunately for him, has to play 2 games back-to-back with the black pieces, so amazing pressure on him. Point total going into today's game, of course, Topalov 2.5 points and Anand 3.5 points, so Topalov is 1 full point back. Now you get 1 point for winning a game, half a point for drawing a game, and no points for losing a game. And whoever gets to 6.5 points first, of course, will be the World Chess Champion for this year. And, it's an interesting game for Topalov. He's able to draw the last game with the black pieces, so he's coming in today under the same amount of pressure, because if he were to lose today, he'd drop another point back, so that's 2 full points with only 5 games remaining. And to get that spread back against somebody like Anand would be extraordinarily difficult to do. So Topalov's definitely under pressure. But Anand's under pressure too, because he was only able to draw the last game with the white pieces. And if he were to lose today, of course the score would be tied up, and in the remaining 5 games, Topalov would have 3 of those games with the white pieces, and Anand would only have 2. Alternatively, if he were to draw today's game, that would basically say, okay, I haven't been able to beat Topalov in the last 2 games with the white pieces, and that, going into the remaining 5 games, when your opponent has 3 cracks with the white pieces and you only have 2, that's definitely going to swing momentum a little bit towards Topalov's favor. And before we get started, I just want to touch a little bit about all this discussion about the white and black pieces. I had a subscriber ask in one of the previous videos, what's the big deal about this? And the short answer to that question is at the top levels of chess, it's generally understood to be a little bit harder to win with the black pieces. That's why a draw is quite acceptable with the black pieces at this level of chess. And the reason is that white gets the first move and can, quite often can kind of create the shape and the flow of the game early on, working towards middle games that they might be a little bit more comfortable with or whatever. Now, it's not always the case that white can't be defeated with, a grandmaster behind the black pieces, but on average, it's just generally accepted that it's a little bit harder to win with the black pieces against a grandmaster who's playing the white pieces. But anyway, let's just get started here. So Anand opens up with pawn to d4, and in fact, we're going to follow lines here for the first little part of the game that we've seen in games 2, 4, and 6. And in fact, this particular move here is identical, I think, to game 4, if I remember correctly. But now we have our first deviation. So actually, for the first time, playing the same lines that they played before, Topalov was able to get his new move into the game. So he selected bishop to e7 here. The last time he pushed his pawn to a5, and of course, if you want to look back at those lines, you can check out game 4. But nonetheless, we're back into a queen's pawn game, and Anand is working towards a Catalan structure. But once again, the big difference here is that Topalov got to play his first pet move, which is bishop to e7. So generally, Anand was able to do that first and kind of dictate play. From here now, Anand continues fianchettoing that bishop onto g2. Topalov castles, Anand castles, and now Topalov pushes his pawn up to c6. So we have quite a strong pawn wedge leading into the center of the board there. From here, Anand continues bishop up now to f4, so he's carving along that dark square diagonal, and Topalov continues now by taking the pawn on c4. So he's a pawn up in the position at this point. Anand replies now by swinging his knight up to e5, so very similar to what we've seen before in previous games in the World Championship Series so far. And from here now, Topalov continues now by pushing his pawn up to b5. And right away, I had to stop and think about this, because there are now 2 attackers on the c6 square. So Topalov is basically saying to Anand, if you want that pawn on c6, go ahead and take it. Now Anand does, because there's no immediate threat here. So once he captures that, Topalov recaptures with the knight, and Anand sweeps in now with the bishop taking here on c6. So he's not only attacking the rook on a8, but he's also attacking the weak pawn on b5. And Topalov's reply was to play his bishop up now to d7, and I was like, what is going on here? That rook on a8 is getting scoped out pretty fiercely by that bishop on c6. So what is Topalov hoping to achieve here? Anand, of course, comes in and grabs that rook on a8. Topalov recaptures, and now it starts to make a little bit of sense. We have the light square bishop sitting on d7. We have the queen on a8, and of course we have that really nice long diagonal carving towards white's castled king. So what Topalov has done is he's come out really early in the game and saying, I'm playing for a win. I'm going to play some attacking chess. I'm going to give up some material, and I'm coming for you, Anand. That's basically basically what he's saying. But the real question is this attack going to work? Because you're playing against, the analyzer Anand. So I was just like, when I saw this, I got to watch the first part of the game before I went to work once again, and I was like, man, this is going to be one interesting chess game. I wish I could watch the whole thing live, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. But nonetheless, I knew as soon as I saw this that we were in for one heck of a fight. So from here, after Topalov captures the rook on a8, Anand now plays his pawn up to f3. And this is kind of blunting that light square diagonal that's leaning down towards his king position. Now Topalov continues in the position by jumping his knight up now to d5, so he's attacking that dark square bishop. Anand, of course, pulls that bishop back to d2. Now this is keeping an eye on the e3 square because that knight is, threatening to come in here and fork the queen and the rook. And from here now, Topalov pushes his pawn up to e5. So he's offering Anand another pawn in the position. Anand, if he wanted to, could just take that pawn. Now why would Topalov do that? Well, if we take a look at his bishop sitting here on d7, the pawn on e6 was blocking that bishop's scope down this light square diagonal. So now all of a sudden, Topalov is basically saying, you can have a pawn, but I want to be able to get my bishop here to h3. From here, Anand doesn't take the pawn right away. Instead, he thrusts his own pawn up to e4, attacking the knight, and Topalov plays bishop to h3, basically saying you can have my knight if you want it, but I really, really want my bishop on h3 because I've got my queen on a8, I got a bishop on h3, I'm willing to give up even more material to bring the attack to you, Anand. And from this position, Anand actually does take the knight here on d5. Topalov captures the rook on f1, Anand recaptures with the queen, and from here now, Topalov captures the pawn on d4. So Topalov is down 2 pawns of material, almost a full minor piece. And what has he gained? Well, if you take a look at those queenside pawns, Topalov has really strong pawns in the position now. He doesn't have nearly as much material as Anand, of course, being a couple pawns down, but he does have an open board to work with to support those pawns and bring those pawns ever closer to promotion. So Topalov has definitely said that even though he's playing with the black pieces, he is playing really sharp attacking chess. And I have to, draw back again that, I don't think Anand was expecting anything like this whatsoever. And Topalov's team, on the other hand, had all of this planned out beforehand. So Anand has to be supremely careful in this position. Any slight mistake, and, Topalov's just going to walk all over him. It doesn't matter that he's down material. He's got an attacking idea. So Anand has to play really, really safe chess from this position on. There's no way that Anand can be looked at as bringing the game to Topalov whatsoever. Anand is in total defensive mode here. Now from this position, Anand does play pawn up to a4, so he's trying to chip away at that really strong pawn structure that Topalov has. Topalov replies by taking Anand's pawn now on d5. Anand recaptures the pawn here on b5, and from here now Topalov snags up that pawn on b5. And now Topalov has 2 pawns on the queen side that can protect each other, and of course the d-file there is, there's no pawns to prevent that d-pawn from coming down, so he has a protected pass pawn along the d-file. Now play continues from this point. Anand pushes his rook up now to a7, snagging up one more pawn in the position. At the same time, he's attacking the dark square bishop here on e7. So Topalov plays his rook over to e8 to defend that bishop, and from here now, Anand pushes his king now to h1, taking it off of that dark square diagonal, because as it stands right now, Topalov could, if he wanted to, get either that dark square bishop or the queen, to c5 or somewhere along that dark square diagonal and push a pawn forward with check. So to prevent that from happening in the future, Anand safely tucks his king onto a light square diagonal. Of course, the queen is protecting the pawn on f3, so it's a fairly safe position for the king to be in, much safer than g1. You definitely don't want to have a discovered check when you have protected passed pawns in the area. So from this position now, Topalov continues bishop back to f8, and that's basically liberating the e-rook to get into the game, taking away from the defense of that bishop. Anand replies now from here, rook over to c7, so he's attacking down the c-file. That means if Topalov were to try to push that c-pawn forward, we'd have an amazing amount of white pieces attacking the c3 square. So Anand is basically blunting that and saying that there's no way I'm going to let you push the c-pawn at any point in this position. And Topalov replies now by pushing his pawn up now to d3. So the d3 c3 pawn, of course, is a pass-protected pawn. Now the queen has no chance of influencing along that light square diagonal, attacking the c4 pawn. From this position now, Anand tucks his bishop into c3, so that's defending the pawn on b2, and Topalov continues now, bishop out now to d6, attacking the rook. Anand peels the rook back, and now Topalov continues by pushing his pawn up to h6. And this is a good move for two reasons. Number one, of course, this king gets an escape square on h7 to prevent any future back row mates, and as a consequence of that, because he has an escape square, he can now totally move that e-rook off of the home rank and get it into the game. So definitely a good move from Topalov in the position. From here now, Anand continues by playing his knight up now to d2. So this is attacking the pawn on c4. So Topalov's going to have to be careful about that. He definitely doesn't want to drop that pawn on c4 because then the d pawn, even though it is passed, becomes exceptionally weak, and he is down material. So he definitely doesn't want that to happen. So from here, Topalov continues now bishop to b4. He wants to get that bishop off of the c3 square. He's prepared to trade the material down, because if he can get that pawn to recapture on c3, that pawn is going to be a weak pawn in the position, and Topalov can try to exploit that. He doesn't have a lot of material left though, but he definitely has to do something about White's bishop on c3, because it is a monstrous defensive piece in the position. Not only is it preventing the c pawn from coming down, but it's also attacking the d2 square. So Anand could pretty much move his knight off of that square, still have that bishop attacking d2. And of course, Anand has a little bit more material than Topalov, so Topalov definitely wants to get that bishop off the table. From here, Anand swings his rook to a1. Now Topalov does trade the bishops, so the pawn recaptures here on c3. The c3 pawn is blocking Topalov's c pawn from coming down, but of course the c3 pawn is now going to be something that Topalov can try to exploit as a weak piece in the position. Definitely a lot weaker than when you're having a bishop and a pawn supporting each other. So from here now, Topalov brings his rook into a much more active position, plays his rook over to e2. Of course, this is attacking the undefended knight, so Anand has to do something about that. So he plays his rook over to d1 to defend that knight. But let's just take a quick look at the position. Topalov has a really active rook in the position now, sitting on e2. Of course, we've got the queen here on b5 that can jump into the action as well. So he is definitely ramping up the pressure. Now, he wouldn't have been able to play that rook to e2 if he wouldn't have pushed his pawn up to h6 to give his king an escape square. So it's nice to see the plans come to fruition, as they take place over the board. So we have a very active rook. Of course, we still have the pass protected d pawn, and Topalov's still bringing the pressure to Anand in this position. So from here now, Topalov keeps ramping the pressure up. He plays his queen over to a4. Now this is threatening bringing the queen to c2. That's going to put two attackers on that knight. That knight would fall in that position. So Anand has to do something about that. But more importantly, it's also, once that queen gets to c2, it's also going to be attacking the c3 pawn. So Anand has to worry about that too. Now he does have a move to take care of both of these threats, and that's knight up now to e4. So that's defending the c3 pawn. It's getting the knight out of danger. But from here, Topalov continues with queen to c2 anyway. So we have the queen supporting the rook, and of course they're eyeing up the h2 pawn now. Anand continues by playing his rook over to c1 to attack that queen, but Topalov still has time to go ahead and hit the check here. He does on h2. The king peels off to g1. Topalov hits the check again. Now Anand liquidates the material. He takes the rook here on g2. Topalov recaptures the rook on c1, and then from here Anand offers up a queen trade, and he plays his queen over to f1. Now, of course, Topalov does not want to trade queens in this position because he's still down material. Now, he's only down a pawn in this position, but he's still down material. He doesn't want to get Anand to activate his king and start ripping into those pawns on the c and d file. So from here, Topalov brings his queen up now to e3, hits a check. Anand blocks by playing his queen up now to f2. Topalov hits a check again on c1. Anand blocks with the queen again on f1, and Topalov hits a check again. Now he's trying to get the position to repeat itself. I think he's going for a draw but through repetition here, but instead of doing that, Anand plays his king up to g2, and I think that Anand is thinking that at this point in the game that he might have a shot at winning this game if he can get the material traded off in a proper manner. But of course, Topalov is going to try hard not to do that. Now, why would Topalov start to try for a draw in this position? Well, he just doesn't have enough firepower to continue on at the attack. Of course, Anand has that beautiful knight on e4 that's always defending the d2 square. Anand still has his queen. Topalov's down a pawn in the position, so he just doesn't have enough firepower to get the job done. So he needs to work towards a draw now. But talk about a spirited attack. That's awesome. But the question is now, can he get the draw? Has he overextended himself too much in the attack, and he just doesn't have enough left to defend the position? Because he most definitely can't go down another point in the match. But anyway, let's get back to the game. So from here, Topalov decided to play pawn up now to f5. So he's attacking that knight on e4. Now that knight was playing a pivotal role defending the d2 square. So Anand plays that knight back now to f2, and from here Topalov continues, bringing his king up now to h7. And from here Anand plays his queen up to b1. And for the first time in a long time, we're looking at the possibility of a piece of Anand's getting into the action and in a little bit more of an aggressive fashion instead of a defensive fashion. Because Anand now has that knight sitting on f2. The knight is in a very solid position, and it's defending the d1 square, which of course the past protected pawn is threatening to come down and promote at some time. And once again, Topalov just doesn't have enough firepower to make that a reality. So the first time in a long time, we're seeing a little bit of aggressive play from Anand. Now, of course, Topalov, once again, cannot lose this game, so he's going to have to play now to defend his position and hold it and try to get a draw. So from here, Topalov brings his queen back now to e6, so that's defending the c4 pawn. Anand swings his queen up to b5 anyway, attacking that pawn, maybe thinking that if Topalov makes a slight mistake, he can get a couple attackers on it, maybe by swinging the knight to d1 and then off to e3, depending on how play follows. But nonetheless, the queen is in a very active position there on b5, and it is attacking that weak pawn, so Topalov's going to have to watch that pawn very carefully. So from here, Topalov pushes his pawn up now to g5, so he's getting his pawns mobilized, coming down towards Anand's castle position, and from here now, Anand pushes his g-pawn up to g4. Topalov captures, Anand recaptures. Now that pawn is protected by the knight, but now that that pawn is on g4, if Topalov tries to push his h-pawn, Anand can capture, and then of course the queen perched on b5 would be attacking that g-pawn, so that's basically taking the option away from Topalov to do that. So from here, he brings his king closer into the position, plays his king to g6, so now that king is protecting that pawn, and from here Anand plays his queen up now to b7. Now of course this is threatening a very key attack here. If Anand can hit the check on e4, he'll force the trade of queens, and that's definitely not in Topalov's interest, because then Anand's king can penetrate into the position and start to munch up those pawns, because he always has the knight perched on f2 to capture on d1. So from here, in reply to this, Topalov pushes his pawn up now to d2. Now this is an interesting move. For example, let's say from here Anand forces the queen trade. Well, if that happens, that pawn can promote, so Anand cannot play that in the position. So instead, facing this move, Anand has to play queen back to b1. So once again, the queen is in a defensive position. A side benefit of playing this, of course, is that the queen hits a check. So Topalov has to do something about that. That gives Anand a little bit more time in the position. So from here, Topalov peels the king back now to g7, and Anand now plays king over to f1. And I'm actually going to flip through the next couple moves because it's just some positional posturing. I think both players are seeing if the other one will make a mistake. Anand does get a little aggressive here, plays his queen to d1, attacking the pawn now on d2. Topalov comes down to defend that. From here, Anand offers up the queen trade, which of course would be in Anand's best interest. Topalov cannot do that though, so he retreats his queen to e6. Anand hits a check now on b7. Topalov plays a king to g6, and basically some more positional posturing takes place, and we see the position repeating itself slightly from time to time. And basically the game ends in a draw. Topalov is actually able to maintain the position, defend the key pieces when he needs to, and he's able to repeat the position just enough to get the draw. But talk about an awesome game from Topalov. You know, playing as the black pieces, knowing how much pressure that he was under coming into this game to at least get the draw, because he definitely doesn't want to lose, because if you lose, he goes down 2 points. We've talked about this a number of times. That's too many when you're playing somebody like Anand. But to come out with the black pieces and get into that attacking style chess and sacrifice material, even though he had so much on the line, was just an awesome strategy, and I think it totally took Anand off guard, and definitely Anand was in a defensive position pretty much for the entire game. So definitely exciting chess. So the point total now, Anand has 4, Topalov has 3, but we have to remember Topalov has 3 more cracks at the white pieces and Anand only has 2, so we definitely still have a world championship match on our hands. Topalov has a decent shot at tying this match 6 points apiece, and he even has a slight outside chance of winning the match. So it's anybody's guess what happens from this point on. Next game, game 8, Topalov with the white pieces. I definitely think we're going to see a different opening strategy from Topalov this time around. I would be totally shocked to see a queen's pawn opening. I think Topalov's going to bust out some things that he's been preparing in the possibly an e4 line or even a knight f3 line. So we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. By the way, I apologize that this video was out just a little bit later tonight. I had work to do, but I definitely got it out to you guys as soon as I possibly could. So take care. Hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.